Hello! It's Arlecchino time! It is April 8th, 2024. It is currently version 4.5 of Genshin Impact. We're talking about Arlecchino. Who is Arlecchino? She's an attack scaling pyro normal attack character. She uses Ball as a resource for her normal attacks and cannot be healed in combat. What is Ball? Bond of Life? Or I'm going to be referring to it as Bond. Arlecchino's elemental skill applies a mark to enemies around her. This is very similar to Hu Tao's Blood Blossom. After 5 seconds, this mark does an instance of damage and technically levels up internally. What does that mean? When she collects the bond from enemies, she gets more if it's leveled up. So at base, she gets 65% bond, and once the bond has leveled up, if she collects after it has leveled up, she gets 130% bond to start with. Now, what do I mean by cannot be healed? Arlecchino uses Bond of Life for her attacks. What does that really mean? Nothing, because she doesn't interact with Bond of Life. She cannot be healed in combat except by her own elemental burst. However, the start of an Abyss floor technically does not count as in combat. She will be healed by the instant receive 25% cards. So that's cool. And apparently she can also be healed by Barbarous C6 if it matters. To maximize healing, if you need an emergency heal at the start of a chamber, you're going to do EQE at the start of your rotation. Not QE because you need the bond, because her burst heals her 150% of her bond. The first 100% of that bond goes to clearing it. So she gets 50% of her current bond and 150% of her attack. So this is a 25 to 60% heal. May buyer beware, caveat emptor, about potential fragility issues or a shield dependency. Should you build the R? No. Skill issue. Bursting is a DPS loss. Simply get good scrub. Okay, with that out of the way, we gotta talk about weapons. The only way Arlecchino has a scythe in combat is with her 5-star weapon. If you were curious why your Arlecchino doesn't have a scythe, it's because you didn't pull her 5-star weapon. Technically, I don't think this weapon is actually that good. If you've bought the battle pass for any extended period of time, or if you own any other 5-star polearm, which is a little unfortunate, but it does give an extra 25% bond every 14 seconds. It does give 36 damage percent. It is a high base, and it does give 21.1 crit rate. It also is her best in slot weapon, make no mistake. Just because I'm saying it might not be the best, it is her best in slot weapon. It also is a significant damage increase over her free-to-play weapon options, which we're gonna get to, because spoiler, her 4-star weapon options are, not good. At least, not ideal. Next best slot weapons are going to be the green stick, the red stick, the blue stick, the yellow stick, the brown stick, the Shenhe stick, and the Tao stick. Let's start with the green stick. The green stick, if you happen to get it from standard, is actually really good. The difference between her 5-star weapon and the green stick should be, I want to say it's 10%, it might be less. The green stick is about equal to her 5-star weapon at R5. So that's cool. When I say equal at R5, I meant the R5 green stick is equal to R1 scythe. She does use the high base from the green stick, and she can stack the passive and get some value out of it. The battle pass weapons, the red stick and the blue stick, you might not always play vape teams, which is the reason I am more quick to recommend the red stick. The red stick is the deathmatch. This weapon gives attack percent and def percent when there are more than 2 enemies. When there is 1 enemy, you only get attack percent from it. It's generally very flexible. It can be used in any team, unlike the blue stick. The blue stick does barely outperform the deathmatch in vape teams, but outside of vape, it is borderline unusable, which is a significantly big problem. The other sticks, the sub 50 stick is actually gonna be pretty cool because Arlecchino cannot be healed. Once you are sub 50, you are sub 50. That's it, even with Bennett. So she can use sub 50 Homa, technically. Calamity Queller, because you start her rotations with her E skill, she can stack it, and it does become very good on her. The Staff of the Scarlet Sands, it's going to be nice for vape. It's a lot of crit. It's a lot of attack if you build EM. Vortex Vanquisher is very similar to the green stick, except you have to have a shield, which some people may just think they need a shield with Arlecchino. Now, the weapon options that are not 5-star or battle pass, they're the bird stick, the white stick, and the dragon stick. We're going to start with Missive Windspear, the classic event weapon that was distributed years ago that no one ever used. Yo, guess what? It's back. This one is not a potential best in slot though for the character. It's actually not great, but it is better than white stick. The white stick is the white tassel. It gives crit rate and normal attack damage percent. Arlecchino is genuinely punished by the low base on this weapon, which is why you won't see it ranked similarly to Slingshot on a lot of characters. As long as you are in a Bennett circle, white tassel is good. That's certainly good enough. White tassel is also generally always competitive with Dragon's Bane, even at Dragon's Bane R5, just because Dragon's Bane doesn't refine super well. Arlecchino's artifact set options are really just one, Fragments of Harmonic Whimsy. This is her set that is releasing with her. It is really the only set you should ever farm. Everything else is 18% worse, but speaking of 8% worse, you may already have a Gladiator's Finale set. This set is a mandatory resin investment. It is available from the Strongbox. The 8% behind measure is significant enough for me to not recommend explicitly farming it for Arlecchino unless you already have it. You're going to use an attacker at EM Sands, a Pyro Goblin, Crit Circlet. Constellations. Her C1 adds 100% Red Death scaling ratio. This is a really fancy way of saying it adds 24% to her normal attack damage now. It's about a 20% total rotation increase. And her C1 also gives resistance to interruption. This should be about as good as Jingcho's resistance to interruption, which is awesome. C2, whenever Arlecchino absorbs the bond created by her elemental skill, she will do 900% talent damage. This is technically E-skill damage. Read into that however you will. Additionally, all bonds from her elemental skill will start at their max level. What does that mean? It means with C2, you do not need to set her E-skill up ahead of your team. You can do something like EQE charged attack, which is going to especially be useful with her C6. Her C3 is her normal attack talent. Broken, what do I need to say? Normal attack talents are amazing. Stop disrespecting +3. It's so good. C4 is a 15% energy refund and it drops the cooldown of her elemental skill. Moving on. C5 is her burst. Moving on. C6. After she uses her elemental skill, she gets 70% crit damage and 10% crit rate for the next 20 seconds. Additionally, using her elemental burst will now do an extra 700% times your current bond as additional talent damage. C6 gameplay. EQE. Charged attack. Normal attack spam. It is more than double the damage from her elemental burst. I talked about it earlier. You need to set up her E-skill ahead of time. She will generally spam N3 dash combos after using her charge attack to collect a bond. Arlecchino cannot be healed, but that doesn't mean Bennett is bad. Bennett is a healerless team for Arlecchino, but she is an attack scaling character with no other way to dramatically increase her own attack. She mostly buffs her own damage percent. She is very dependent on Bennett because of this. All of her best teams are Circle Impact with a permanent Pyro aura on herself and no active healing. Best of luck. Now, before we talk about the rest of her teams, there is an important disclaimer about short rotations. While they may be very strong on paper, there are some downsides to running teams with these damage profiles. They need very tightly tuned energy economy to function. The shorter your rotation is, the less kill particles you'll be getting from doing more overall damage, and the more of a DPS loss you face by not having enough energy on your characters. Chevra's official Bennett is Arlecchino's theoretical highest DPS team in single target on paper. The rotation should use only 15 normal attacks on Arlecchino. The easiest way to do this is 5 N3s, or 4 N4s, or 2 N2s and an N3. You could also extend your rotation and greed for additional damage, which is not a real issue. Regarding VV Vape, the optimal form of this team is going to be Yelan Sucrose. This is what I expect to yield the fastest speedrun clears for Arlecchino. The reason I'm recommending Sucrose over Kazuha here is because of the rotation difficulty of Arlecchino starting with a Pyro Aura, because you need to set up her E-skill ahead of time. In theory, Sucrose should be a lot easier to play than Kazuha. If you want a shield, I would actually try Chiori Zhongli Bennett. This team is a short rotation, but if you're running a shield, you're probably not worried about the downsides. And as long as your energy works out, it won't be a problem. This is theoretically just better than Yelan Zhongli Bennett. Chiori's a pretty cool character. I like her. You could always run Jingcho for defensive utility with his damage reduction. You can run him in combination with Yelan, have fun. You could also play a shield with Chevras. The options are Toma or Dihya, or you could try to play Beto. Those are the options. I think Arlecchino is a very strong character who can do a lot of damage and has very impressive teams. She has drawbacks in that she cannot be healed, and none of her best teams really want to run a shielder at this moment in time, as well as Bennett just actively griefing you in combat with the Pyro Aura. Bennett makes you take more damage from enemies. That's just true. And I don't know how much of a problem it's going to be for Arlecchino. There are going to be a lot of players who just won't have problems with these things, and they're just quirks, which is kind of where I expect myself to land. But for some players, it could be a serious issue. And I do recommend people to maybe shop around a little bit instead of impulsively grabbing her as she releases. That being said, if you are able to overcome a lot of these things, she just does a lot of damage. Even with a shield, her teams are very good. She's a very strong character. Make sure you subscribe. Follow me on twitch.tv/jstern25. I stream daily. Take care.